Carah, good to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's interesting. I love the name that you choose to go by, the Nuancehoe. The hope part, you'll have to explain. But the nuance part, because I think I'm nuanced. I think I try to look at every single issue on its own merit. I think it's a really beautiful way to see life. I think too often we think if I agree with this person on this one thing, then I have to agree with them on everything. And I love the idea of no, I can just pick each issue on its own and create my own ideas and thoughts around it. And it gives me what I believe is a more well-rounded, educated, experience of life in general.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Nuancehoe came from this guy, Nuance Bro. Have you ever heard of Nuance Bro?
No.
He was like a YouTuber, kind of like a right-leaning YouTuber I was friends with. I used to run like a kind of funny, I was like an alter ego of myself back in the day, where I had like a conservative, funny Twitter page that I was friends with this guy, Nuance Bro. And I thought if I ever left the church, I ever wanted to start over, I would be the female version of that, of like Nuancehoe. So when I first started on TikTok and I just didn't know I'd even be a content creator, I wanted to go with that name. And then it just kind of like came out. And now I've kind of changed now. I just go by Carah Burrell more than I can because I'm trying to be like a nonprofit director now. And I'm like, my email address is like Nuancehoe. And I'm like, this is a little bit embarrassing. But I like to push things with comedy so people know that I'm not always like, don't take everything so seriously, because people's faith and politics and everything that I talk about, I know it's totally really sincere and people's tightly held beliefs and all of these things and stuff. And it's like, okay, it came from a girl named Nuancehoe. Don't try to rip me apart, guys. You know that I'm a little bit just,
Yeah, well, humor is, the comedians saved humanity since the beginning of time. They can say things in a way that no one else can, that calls out the ridiculous thing, right?
Yeah.
It's funny when I was doing real estate, you deal with a lot of people's email addresses, and this was, maybe more closer to like 10 or 15 years ago before people were changing their emails. But you'd get these occasional women that had picked their email in college, and there was a lot of stuff like that, and you're just like, it's like whatever, like, nuancehoe at hotmail.com or whatever. And it was just always funny to get this very professional older person that's like, my emails, and they're like trying to say it without feeling stupid.
It's like Bieber forever.
Yes.
24, cutesy. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Cutesy lover 27, whatever.
Yeah. When we still had AOL and stuff.
Yeah.
But mine is, I literally started a nonprofit and I literally started a podcast and did all of this stuff, knowing that I was like, all right, I'm really sticking with this Nuancehoe name. All right, everyone, please take me professionally, but also not too much.
No, it's good. I got a lot of, we're going to talk about Tim Ballard a lot in this. You've created this whole series on YouTube called Timmy Did What, and we'll dive into that. It's really breaking down some of these problems that have happened with o.u.r. and Tim Ballard. What's interesting is, one of the things that got me in those circles, people like o.u.r. and whatever else, was my ability to just joke around with very successful men or people in general. They're so serious and they're always on guard. They're always just really dialed in with everything they say. And I would come in and just kind of put them at peace, and they loved me for it, and the guy that got me involved, Paul Hutchinson, you've talked about him a little bit in some of your podcasts, but he loved me because I would call him on his shit like no one else. And he just told me one day, he's like, Jimmy, I just trust you. Like, you say things that I absolutely already know are true. I know that this part of my life is a shit show, but everyone just kisses my ass. And you're the one guy that'll give it to me straight, And so anyways, with his first marriage, after I met him, he was about to marry this woman. I remember we were handcuffed in the back of a car in Cancun, Mexico, just did an op. And me and him got stuck in the back because when they arrested us, they'd arrest the traffickers, they would take us, like they were taking us to jail, but they would take us to the airport. So me and Paul got stuck in this car, and he had his ex-fiance or ex-wife, I guess, had been on that op. It's a whole nother story for another day, and she was a mess and she was causing problems and she almost blew the op. And I was like, Paul, you can't marry this girl. You know this, right? Like, you cannot marry this woman. She will ruin your life. And he's like, wait, you're serious? I'm like, yeah, I'm dead serious. And he told me, I actually didn't get invited to the wedding. I was like the one friend that wasn't there because I was so outspoken to him. But he always appreciated that. We joke about it now because she was a complete train wreck. And he knew it, but I had enough love, I will use as the word, to actually tell him the thing that nobody else would.
Yeah. Yeah. The humor, but also people knowing that you're the real deal, that like you will not bullshit somebody at the same time, that you can love them, but you also won't bullshit them. Seeing through like the BS overall, just kind of cutting through the crap.
Yeah, I think you actually reported you reported on her recently. I think she got arrested for basically molesting a young man. Like yeah, that's her. And I was the one sitting there like, dude, you cannot marry her. She's a freaking mess. And God bless him. He, just, what's funny about nuance though? It's like, I talk about this a lot these days. It's like people do things and you think like to this day, he absolutely probably loves her. Like there's just love and it's like real. And it's like, this person isn't good for you, but you still love them. And so it's this complicated thing. And if you don't really have strong direction of where you're trying to go with your life, you don't have friends that are willing to really help you and direct you and people you can count on to give you good advice, you can end up, thinking with your heart or your penis or whatever and put yourself in some really weird spots.
Yeah, some really hard spots. Yeah, some really one. The way that I think about nuance, I have not articulated this before, so this is going to be brand new.
This is hot off the press. Let's hear it.
My life has been actually so good in the last couple months. I'm happier than I've ever been, and part of it is I haven't been working into making as many podcasts because I will always look back at the time in my life right now where like my kids are growing up, and I will always say to myself, I am abundant in all of the things that matter, and I have a very abundance mindset, you could say right now, as opposed to times in my life, whether in the church or outside the church, that were much more of like a scarcity mindset where you don't recognize how much you're operating from a place of like anxiety or fear or scarcity, where I just feel like overall, like we talked before the mics turned on about doing a lot of psychedelics. And now I'm just like in this flow state where like things are just good. I'm just in day after day, things are progressing. I just feel like I'm in an abundant state. And when I'm in this type of lifestyle, I can be as nuanced as possible because I'm not grasping for needing to be right. I'm just open to hearing any perspective and taking things in and being interested in hearing somebody out, whether that's, in a professional way or just like in an interpersonal way with my family, my friends. We talked before the mic turned on about how extremely Mormon my parents are. And there's times in which in my Mormon deconstruction, like, I wouldn't ever instigate something, but my mom or dad would say something to me. And I was like, oh, it's go time. I'm like, you think that I'm a wreck? I'm like, do you want to talk about Joseph Smith? And she was like, do you want to talk about this and that? I mean, like, you want to talk about train wrecks? I was like, we can go, Mom. But I think that kind of operates from more of a place of like, I'm grasping at needing to prove something where it's just like, me, my family, and my friends, all my relationships are just kind of love now. And in that state, I could be nuanced. I can understand that the people I disagree with, or I was like, oh, they don't understand this perspective. They don't understand that perspective. If only they knew. I'm at the point now where I just don't care. I know people love me and I love them. And we're on that kind of plane.
Well, that kind of takes away some of my main questions I wanted to talk to you about because
I'm more nuanced than ever, I swear.
Well, no, what's interesting is, people say like, why do they leave the church, but they can't leave the church alone. And if you haven't left the church, you'll never understand that. Like it's part of your identity forever. But the thing that I've always seen interesting, and I'm grateful that I chose to do it this way. When I left the church, I actually took 2 years where I said, I'm just going to study it. I'm not going to tell anybody, but I'm going to read everything. Like I'm going to read the non-Mormon stuff, the Mormon stuff. And I got as clear as I was that the church was true, that it wasn't for me. And so I was like, shit, now what? But I decided to take another 2 years before I told anyone. Because I didn't want to be in that space where I was too loud, where I was still figuring out what my new identity was, what my new beliefs were, all these different things. I think what you're saying a little bit is, you unfortunately or fortunately, whatever, had a mic in front of your face as you're deconstructing your faith, and you probably upset a lot of people in your world and your family being part of that. And so where you've gotten to now is you're like, I don't need to be right. One of my favorite things about not being in the church is you don't care if other people believe the same as you. I don't care if people have the same beliefs. I don't even want them to. I'm like, I don't even know if I'm right. I mean, this is what I think about God today. This is why I think Jesus existed. But I don't care if people believe me. When you're in the church, you really care because it's like your identity is under attack if it's not the same as other people's. And so you're always trying to share it. But for me, I know for me, I'm very grateful I waited a few years to kind of deconstruct it before I started talking about it. It sounds like that's a little bit of where you have gotten to.
And I wouldn't have noticed that at the time because like when you're discovering new information and you're changing your mind really rapidly, like I had a time in which I was in like a 7-year Jesus freak phase is what I call it, where I was like shoehorning in the most evangelical Christian stuff of like pastors and sermons and books and Jesus music for like 7 years of my 20s, where like I sounded more and I talked more and gave my testimony more like an evangelical Jesus freak than a Mormon, because I was a very grace-based person. And that was also like the happiest times of my life. But I was on a certain plane, on a certain type of belief system that didn't mesh anywhere, but it was something that I jailbroke that made sense for me. And it was a really beautiful, wonderful time. And then when I realized Mormonism wasn't true like I thought it was, and I was like, oh, it's not a true thing. And I looked at Christianity and I was like, that's the devastating one. And I had a lot of the dark night of the soul where now I didn't have that outlet for relieving some, like the anxiety and where you go for these existential answers. All of that was really dark and painful. And so I didn't realize during that space that is going to take, it's going to look back. Now I look back at more of it now as more of a grieving process than I would have liked to admit, that like there is just a vacuum there that's exciting for the first time. You get to make up your own values and your own ideas, and you don't have somebody else tinkering with you. But it also is like being a computer without an operating system, which is why we invented religion in so many ways, because of all of the structure and the myth and the collective bargaining with humanity and with existential dread that we all participate in. And so I always understood the nuance of why what religion offers and why I can't believe in it like with my best judgment. But then what do I believe in its place? I didn't realize how much of that kind of space was going to be more of a grieving period, and not just like, oh, I recognize this thing and now I move on with my life. Like, so yeah, I got pregnant. We left the church in 2019 and immediately got pregnant like right after that with our third baby. And if anyone is thinking about having a major life change, just wait a couple years. And if you're going to like move or like get divorced or like have a kid or like anything, just like give it a couple years before you have. I didn't realize what a gigantic major life change, because we decided to get pregnant like the month after we left the church. And that the whole pregnancy, not having God to lean on. And then right after the baby was born, it was during COVID and it was our third baby. My husband lost his job. You don't know what life is going to throw at you. And like going on TikTok, that was really like, it was a miracle. It felt like it saved my life. Like I was really, really sick after I had my third baby. I was like bedridden. They thought I had like MS. I was like non-functional for a long time. And going on TikTok kind of like saved my life, where it gave me a motivation to be like, okay, if I can feel healthy enough, I can record something. So all my early TikToks back in like 2020 and 2021, I was writing while I was like nursing a baby in my bed. Like I was still very much like a conservative trad wife. Like I was just at the peak of my deconstruction, just like, oh, I have some things I want to say. Like, yeah, like you said, like there's a mic in front of me and now there's some things I want to say. And like, I don't know how else to put it, but like, it's kind of just like, I don't know, in the comedy club, like anything goes, just like throwing tons of shit at the wall all the time.
One of the things I always say to people is like, there's no manual on how to leave a religion you're born into.
Yeah.
And it's messy tough. And you're going to make mistakes. Like I made mistakes, I said things to offend members of my family, and that was the last thing I wanted to do. And it's like, okay. And that's when you have to just go, you have to give yourself grace and just go, you know what? Like, I don't know. I just am feeling a lot. I want people to ask me about my experience and they're not. And I feel alone over here. And I feel like there's this vacancy of this, I don't even know what the hell my purpose is anymore. And you, like you said, you kind of have everything figured out for you. And then you realize you don't have any of it figured out. Mm-hmm. And it's a lot of work. That's the word I use. It's a lot of work to figure it out again. And you have to really be able to find the time and put that in, or else you kind of stay in this little lost space of not knowing who you are or why you're here.
Yeah, all of those questions. And I'm so grateful to be in this space. Like, I don't know what I would do without the friends and the people that I've met just by being kind of plucked by John Dehlin off of TikTok into Mormon Stories, and the like countless amount of guests and friends and people at different conferences to meet and hear their perspectives. Like I really look up to people like Britt Hartley, who does no nonsense spirituality and stuff like that, that people who are really doing the work and putting in the time to help other people who have different existential fears and dreads and all of the things that religion and different false beliefs can kind of fill a hole for a while, but asking, what does science say? What are the best mechanisms as humans that we've come to understand, like to create the best human flourishing and have those conversations with people openly and honestly without fear that like you're taking something away, or just trying to like add more beauty and add more love to the conversation, because we already know what religion kind of offers. Like, I know the good about Mormonism. I could speak forever about the good of Mormonism. I wish I could be Mormon. I wish I could lobotomize myself again. That's how it felt when I was in the church.
Oh,
like,
I always said, I was like, I wanted the church just to be true for me. It was just like,
I didn't want to sin.
I didn't want to leave. I know, same.
The church, following the rules wasn't hard for me.
I went 3 years after I left before I drank, you know?
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
I lost my virginity in my 30s. Like, I was a good damn Mormon. Yeah, I did the damn thing. Thank you. I did the thing. Like,
you did it.
It wasn't because I wanted to sin, you know?
Yeah. And it's I know the good about Mormonism or any other religion. Like, I understand it. That's why it's here. And it's like, in some ways, stood the test of time, where people can, you know, like me, see all of the ways you can poke holes in the theology and the corporate structure and all of that. All of that is true. And still, there's some days like, oh, I love so much about Mormonism. I love so much about Mormon culture. Like, people would think that I'm lying when I'm saying that. I'm like, I could really go on a mission for Mormonism. But when it's not a true thing anymore, and really picking up those pieces of what is it that made me so happy in it, I can say now, finally, taking enough space from thinking about it. I don't make as many podcasts as I used to. I have a lot of family stuff going on right now. And I just get to be a mom. And I love being a mom, and I love just being a person who gets to read books and reconnect with myself. And that same type of thing that I described in like the 7-year Jesus freak phase that I was in, that was just like a lot of love and abundance, when you're kind of like, my best friend Jesus has my back. Like, I've kind of circled back to that state of like just happiness and calm and abundance, that rocking the boat of leaving the church.
Well, I could see that you'd be at a lot of peace right now, like after having been so public with really coming out against the church in a lot of ways. I mean, you were on Mormon Stories for a couple of years, and that's the space that I wanted to ask you about. Is I feel like I'm always in the camp of, you know, try to build up, not tear down, no matter what. So it's like, build the thing that you believe in, not tear down the thing that you don't. But I was going to ask you, during that time you're on Mormon Stories, because you get a lot of negative publicity. I've been asked, you know, John's invited me a couple of times, we're friends, I would say, to come on. And I've chosen not to do it at this point, because I just don't want to upset people in my life that see that as a very negative thing towards their religion. And so I'm imagining being on that as often as you were, you did get a lot of negative pushback. I'd just love to hear, maybe you didn't. I'd love to hear your experience just in the time you were on Mormon Stories.
Okay. So it's interesting. Yeah, I totally respect that decision. There's so many people who wanted to be guests and stuff, and it's like, oh, could we blur our face, or could you redact this? And once you get into that area,
no,
it's just
if I say anything, I put my name on it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You know, and so we have enough guests, we have enough people who are willing to do that. And it's difficult, yes, because there are people. So in my personal life, I don't know, I'm really a leap first, look back later. Like, I'm more of a do first and then figure it out later kind of person. So obviously I didn't realize certain things and like ramifications has been a big part of my post-Mormon journey of like, oh, I didn't think through how that would affect this. So like when I did my Mormon Stories interview, I wasn't thinking through anything that I said would make my family upset with me. And
piss them off?
And then my mom did watch the thing, and obviously she already has opinions about what I was doing up to that point. And she felt like I just totally shit on her. And I was like, I had no idea. I did not try. I was really nuanced. And there's certain things where you say it and you just can't help that people are going to be offended with the way that you.
Well, I've talked about parts of my childhood, and I thought I was honoring my mom, and I offended her, right? Like, I talked about. If you don't just say like it was great, no notes, like. Well, I talked about how like I didn't have enough money for my school lunch one time, and so my buddy would pay me like $3 every day to carry his saxophone to and from school. And that's how I got to have good lunch. And it taught me how to be industrious. It taught me to work hard. So I'm telling this story in a podcast, and it was a beautiful story, and I wouldn't want it to be different. And my mom called me, and she's crying, and she's just like, I tried my best. I wish I had more money. And I'm like, Mom, you missed the whole point. Yeah. Like, I was honoring the situation. Like, I love that that's how it was. But yeah, even though you're not trying to, you can. Yeah, same kind of stories like that. And my parents, they just view everything I do as just slashing and dashing the church. And I view it as like,
I have a lot of sarcasm, a lot of humor. I like to like, I don't know how dirty I can be on this, but I view it as just like,
I guess.
Sometimes the truth is just like a dildo
listening.
of truth, and like humor is the lubricant of just like getting fucked up. Sometimes it's hard to take the truth. Some things are just absolutely devastating information, and I try to do it with humor, and I try to do it with nuance and love and empathy of like, I was there too. I'm like, I am never trying to punch down on anyone. I do not like to make any content that makes Mormonism look like, hey, look at the freak show over here. I'm like, I'm talking about me and like the things I used to believe and the ways that like my culture is just funny and has all these idiosyncrasies. And so I'm like, I don't try to just slash and dash. I'm trying to come from a place of like, this is an institution, this is a corporation, and there's certain things that do cause real harm in people's lives, and let's call those things out for what they are. Let's empathize with the people who are affected by these things and try to like look for ways to make systemic change, because I do believe that from the outside and the bottom up is how Mormonism has always been reformed, and it's not just by telling dissenters to sit down and shut up and leave if you don't like it. Like it's bottom up, outside in kind of activism stuff. So I just try to keep those conversations going. But back to your question about Mormon stories. Like I didn't realize at the time how much it would affect my relationship with my parents, because it's one thing to leave the church, and then it's one thing to just, you are partners with John Dehlin, Satan. Like that is, like I didn't realize how much like my mom goes to Book of Mormon evidence conferences with like that Tim Ballard used to speak at with like Rod Meldrum.
Okay.
Like my parents have gone to those for years.
They show you the map of where Nephi and Moroni were, and it's like in like Mexico and stuff. Yeah, I gotcha.
I'm obsessed with like the American Covenant and Tim Ballard's like Heartlander stuff with Rod Meldrum. And yeah, my parents go to those conferences, and like they have literally, Rod Meldrum is called John Dehlin, my old boss. Like there was a time in which I had a blessing. Rod was like, I had a blessing before I went on Mormon Stories, and they were like, oh, I hope that John Dehlin dies, because like people want this man dead because of like how much they view that he is Satan incarnate, and he fights against the forces of good, and he is evil. I didn't realize like that's how serious it is to them. Like everything that's going on lately with like the satanic possessions of like in Jodi Hildebrandt and Ruby Franke, like that Hulu documentary.
Wild,
like,
by the way.
Yeah. Like that sphere of what people believe, like that, my parents they're in those types of beliefs. So even saying that right now, I don't want to be like offensive and I'm looking down. I'm saying this like matter of factly. So I'm like, I just don't believe in any of that, but they do. And so they put me in that category. So that's affected our relationship. But now,
you being able to
now we're good. Now we're totally fine.
Well, I had a similar type thing. I got to be honest and say my family could not have been more accepting when I left the church. They really actually were pretty awesome. I will say good. When I started having distance from them, or when they distanced themselves from me, is a better way to say it, is when I started speaking about psychedelics. I had a bishop on here that did ayahuasca while he was a bishop. And, that podcast went super viral in Utah, got multiple six-figure of views. And that's when I think I became dangerous to them, because my nieces and nephews that look up to me, they don't know the difference between me talking about heroin or mushrooms for therapy. Yeah. And I had to kind of put myself in their shoes. And I don't think I fully appreciated, because I felt so confident of my relationship with them and the love that we have, I don't think I fully appreciated how hard it was on them to hear from other outside people, like, because they're friends in the church and they're people that they're trying to be just their neighbors and people like that. There's like, dude, your brother's talking about drugs on his podcast, and I don't think I fully appreciated how hard that was for them. And so I had to take a step back from that. I think kind of like you have, I'm like, I don't need to die on this hill. I don't need to be the spokesman for psychedelic drugs. Like, I don't need to be the person pushing plant medicine anymore. And so I just decided I'd rather have my relationship with my family. I'd rather have them feel safe with me than worry about pushing these narratives that like really didn't benefit me in any other way. I wanted other people to experience what I had, because I knew how effective and how healing it had been for me and my friends, but I was missing the shadow of it, or the negative part of it. And so it was cool for me to kind of do the whole thing through and realize like, oh, I see why they had to push me away. And, I just quit talking about it, because I'm like, I'd rather have that relationship than be the spokesman for this thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm in a stage of life right now where I have kids. I have one daughter who's on the spectrum. I have a 4-year-old son, 8-year-old daughter, and a 10-year-old daughter. I'm like, I am still in the thick of raising my kids in Utah, and I need all the family support that I can get. And my parents, they want to give me that support, and I want them to be in my kids' life, and I want to minimize any, things on the internet or whatever that would make them think that I just think that they're just a bunch of dumb idiots, because I know that their religion provides them so many opportunities to serve and try to be like Christ. Like, I know that that's what they're trying to get out of it, and I can feel that as their daughter, and their grandkids can feel that. So I'm like, that's all I really care about.
And I think that's just a very adult way of looking at it, right? Like, this is working for them. Why would I want to make that a negative experience for them in any way?
Yeah.
But I think for people like you and I, it didn't work. So we had to figure out other things that, we gravitated towards. Well, I want to shift the topic a little bit, because you've really started focusing your podcast recently on Tim Ballard, and going after who I got to know very well. Yep. I guess maybe part of this, maybe what is your evolution? What was your motivation for doing this, and kind of what has been that experience so far?
So I, as an outsider, I didn't go on raids. I wasn't part of o.u.r. I was a very, very conservative Mormon kind of Christian person. So I feel like in certain aspects, I understand the type of circles that, his base were in. Like I said, he started it going to these Book of Mormon evidence conferences, where my co-host of the podcast now, Ryan Fisher, first kind of scooped him up and said, hey, can I get you on my TV show, Nephite Explorer? And Ryan Fisher platformed him back in the day. And so Ryan and I, my co-host of my Timmy Did podcast, we both kind of come from similar circles of families who are like kind of preppers and, and these really? And like Heartlanders and like, that kind of sphere already. So I understand it. But when I felt like D-Day to me, the morning that Glenn Beck released that like firestorm of tweets on Twitter in like September 2023.
It was about a week after my podcast.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was about 10 days after I put my podcast out, was when Glenn came out.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, I was very grateful, because it was
I didn't realize that
I was
timing.
getting attacked a little bit by Tim's people, like his fans. And after Glenn, and then Sean Reyes, and then also the church, they all, after my podcast came out, and spoke out against it as well.
I had no idea.
Actually, I think the church went first, and then it was my podcast, but yeah.
Yeah, because that was a big month.
Big one. Yeah. It was a big one.
And so I remember it started with waking up to the Glenn's tweets and being like, what the hell happened here? And he's just saying like, never in the history has the church just like publicly denounced someone like this. And I'm like, if the church is publicly denouncing somebody, I was like, there are skeletons in this closet that are darker and deeper than anything I can imagine. And I have been complimented throughout time that, Carah, you have a great BS meter, and thank you very much, anyone who says that. And that's what I saw from that moment. I was like, people are not thinking big enough. People on Word Radio and all these like pro-Mormon podcasts, they're like, there's no way that he could be like molesting people and also try to be an anti-sex trafficker. Like you wouldn't be able to hold your head up high and walk out the door in the day. And I'm like, you guys don't understand how.
I was the opposite. I'm like, how can you look at child porn for 9 years as your profession,
really,
and then be normal afterwards?
That's true.
Like that's what I thought. I'm like, of course he's doing weird kinky things sexually, because he had to actually be in that world where, if you see The Sound of Freedom, he was actually watching the videos. And I don't know if that's accurate, but it seems like it is.
Yeah. I don't know how that F's with your brain. Like,
I don't know how you come back from that.
I don't know how you come back from any of that.
No.
So when I saw the church denounce him, I'm like, the church's language on that, I was like, there is something here. And I would just like hooked myself to that in that day and was like, I want to know everything. I got the day that it came out, my friend Shalise at Cults to Consciousness, she's like, do you want to do a live stream tonight and talk about Tim tonight? Like the day that news broke. And I was like, give me 6 hours to read everything I can on the internet, and then I'll just tell you what I've learned. And I was just like, I was hooked in from that moment of just like the whiteboard meeting. There's just this web, there's so much there. And the fact that it ties back to the church and the state of Utah.
That's the part that's so crazy, is the M. Russell Ballard connection. That's the part that like gets very interesting to me.
Yeah.
Because he was a business partner, and how much did he know, and what was exactly his blessing to Tim and what he promised him and all that. Because that's the part that got it. And I have no idea. I don't have any of that information, but that's what got interesting to me.
And that's where
then he died before we could get any info. Like, that was convenient.
That's why I made a very irreverent TikTok that day.
What'd you say?
I was like, bring, church's PR department. Oh, M. Russell Ballard died? Everyone stop celebrating. Oh, okay. All right, great. Anyway, so everyone take the next couple weeks off. Crisis averted kind of stuff. But no, my co-host Ryan, who's just such a sweetheart and was business partners with Tim, he has really helped illuminate so much of the story that we just wouldn't have if Ryan wasn't willing to share and come forward and put his time and mind and resources into sharing this much. He's also part of the lawsuit now. So Ryan's just like the most stand-up guy. And so he contacted me many months ago and has illuminated so many parts of this. And what he's explained is how the relationship between Tim and Apostle M. Russell Ballard first got started. And Ryan was there in those meetings. And part of this whole, interconnected business dealings was that the church and M. Russell Ballard, they wanted Tim to be like this all-American Mormon boy that could be propped up and to truly, like the whiteboard meeting says that Tim wrote out, is take the sizzle of the rescue and lead them to the covenant.
Well, Tim told me, this is from Tim's mouth to me, he said this is going to be the best missionary tool we've ever had. We will lead more people to the church through o.u.r. than anything else that's ever existed. I mean, that was, he was very aware of that part of it, and that was a very important piece for him as far as his motivation for doing
Exactly, yeah. And to hear that, like, my co-host Ryan was in these meetings and that was explicitly his calling, like, from the church to create this TV show that Ryan was also supposed to be helping on, to create a TV show that would do that exact thing, that take the sizzle and lead people back to the covenant. And what my understanding is, and you can fill in the pieces for me, is Ryan and Tim were asked by the church and by M. Russell Ballard to try to create this TV show that became The Abolitionists. But Ryan was first trying to get this network deal because he had some connections with the National Geographic Channel, and they were going to air this TV show of these raids and jumps and stuff. It was going to be in like 90 countries or something. But Tim, it wouldn't be in America. And that's all that mattered, is that he needed the fame and the publicity. He needed his cohorts in America for it to be filmed. And so he turned down this deal that was really upsetting. And so then they rehashed their plan to go make the Abolitionist TV series, which was then scrapped to make the Abolitionist documentary film, which is what I just destroyed on my latest YouTube video. Thank you so much. So the real idea of like what Tim was after and why I care about this subject is because looking at that, I think you have a heart for kids. That's why you went on those raids. I have a heart for kids. Anybody who hears all these horrible stories of sex trafficking, nobody on the planet doesn't want to help end this. But when you take children's suffering and you try to say, how is this a business opportunity for me? How can I do something else outside of just what needs to be done here, whether it's fame or myth making or a business empire or leading people back to a church because you think that that's the answer, that the atonement of Jesus Christ will solve anything. If it's not just what systemically creates the most change in the most people's lives and using the money and resources and the what's available to you, anything outside of that, I think is nefarious and it's wrong. And I just want to steer people to say, like, this is the empire that he's built, that it was for these different motivations and these different factors. It was self-interest and promotion with these LLCs, with the whiteboard meeting. He was funneling this money here, and I just want to call that out and say this is a good cause, but Tim Ballard's not the one to do it.
So let me give you my take, because there's some things similar, but there's a couple of things that I'll add here. I think Tim saw a need and said, I absolutely want to do something about this. I think he absolutely was working in good faith when he started it. I think he felt like he could make a difference. And then I think what happened is he got shocked at how quickly this became very big. And I think he was around a lot of people at that point that had money or big success, and he didn't. And I think what happened is you start getting fame, and it went to his head very fast. The day that I lost my respect in Tim, because Tim was always terrible at making decisions. He was never qualified to do this. And here's where I'll give Tim credit. I don't think anybody's qualified to do this. I don't think anybody's qualified to go undercover and help rescue kids from sex trafficking. I don't think there's a single human alive. I can look at the ops that we did, and the only reason I can hold my head up high and be proud of what we did is we had specific ops where we took people out that were absolutely trafficking children, and I know it helped hundreds of other kids never get into that. There was an 8th grade school teacher that was using her position to take kids, and she would get them in this compromised position. They would be, I guess you call it raped or whatever, like taken advantage of. And then they would hold it over them. And we know this because we were able to tap their phones in an op we did in Mexico. And they heard the girls talking about, please don't make us go do this again. It was like all recorded. So anyway, so I do believe there was intent was good at the beginning with Tim. Where Tim got in trouble is his ego was just out of control. Like we did a charity event. I talked about this many times, but we did a charity event. It was a black tie gala and co-hosted by like Rudy Gobert and Sean Reyes, the Attorney General. And we were telling about a story about some of these, what's the organization in Iraq with
Nazarene Fund?
Yeah, the Nazarene Fund. So Andy McCubbins and Paul Hutchinson and Tim had flown to Iraq to help with this, to rescue this girl that had been kidnapped, and they got her and they returned her to her mom. I have the video on my phone. And when they return her, it's the most beautiful video. Well, I just was trying to make the gala that we were doing as interesting as possible, as emotional as we could so that we could raise more money. And so I showed the video and I had Paul and Andy on. Tim had just spoken about kids, what's the adoption one?
Children Need Families.
Thanks. Yeah. You got all the details for me. The whole thing with Children Need Families, he had just spoken for 10 minutes about it on the stage with Janet and the whole thing. So it was like, he just had his moment. So I pull Andy and Paul up to give them their moment. And we show this video of the girl being reunited with her mom. Well, Tim's sitting at the front table. His wife gets up pissed and leaves. And then Tim follows her out. They end up getting into a fight with Paul, and the whole fight was Tim's wife was pissed that they were taking credit for this thing that Tim was at, and it didn't show Tim there. Like, why wasn't Tim on the stage? And it was like so egotistical. It had nothing. It was so disappointing because it truly was for like me, Andy, and Jeremy, especially like all about the kids. It really was. And Paul too, like Paul really did care about like this, but Paul and Tim, I mean, they have two of the biggest egos I've ever met. And they're sitting there fighting, literally yelling at this event where like 200 people there as donors, and they're outside in the sky freaking yelling at each other. That was the day I was like, what are we doing? And that was the last event I ever hosted or anything I ever did with o.u.r. But my point of that is I do think that he started in good faith, but he got greedy and his ego got involved and he started seeing the fame. He started getting recognized. He started getting people telling him how amazing he was. And I think there's even a scripture in the Book of Mormon or DNC or one of these that warns against this. Like when people get a little bit of power, they abuse it, right? I think that's what happened to Tim. I don't think it started that way. So then the other thing that Tim did is he pushed away all the good people. He pushed away anybody that was good for him, Dave Lopez, Dutch, our group, all these different people that were really there to help him. And he kept around, I won't say any names, but a couple of literally like the least favorite people I've ever met in my life, just pure snakes.
What's the name of his Kronk? That's what I call him. Like, Emperor's New Groove, like Kronk. Like,
I've never seen the Emperor's New Groove.
You never seen Emperor's?
No.
The fans will get it.
Anyway, but he had a couple of guys that he kept around him that were just...
His Coop is his Kronk.
Okay, I got you. He's not the worst one, to be honest. But the point is that he kept around all these yes men. And so all of the legal sexual assault or whatever you want to call them cases that came out later was after all the people that cared about him were gone. Like he pushed away anybody that would push back on him, anybody that would give him honest feedback. And he only had these cronies or these yes men around him. And so I can see how this happened. And he started, this happens every time when guys get this power. And I think Tim was just like, wait, I want some of this attention. I want some of these, all these ladies are giving me attention. And I think he let it go to his head. And I think he fucked up big time. I think he started abusing his power. And where I spoke up, the reason why I decided to speak because Vice interviewed me years before any of the stuff broke about Tim. And I thought everybody was talking. So I went on the record with my name, which I always will. If I'm going to say something, I'll put my name to it. And I said how Tim was terrible at making it. I said all this. Yeah. And I was the only one named my name in the damn article. And so I had all these people, o.u.r. pissed at me, but I didn't care. I was like, whatever, I spoke my truth. But my point is like, this is where I think Tim got in the most troubles. I think he had no one around him to push back on him. All the people that truly cared, were pushed out the door by that point. And so the only people still there was family that was all the board. You had all these cronies around him that were the employees. And then the power and ego went to his head and he made some big mistakes. And I do think that he, did those things because I had enough women reaching out to me. I had 3 different women reach out to me privately and say, hey, this happened to me too. When the story started breaking, that's when I decided to talk about it because I'm like, damn.
It's going to be coming.
Yeah. My videographer and his wife's public with us. So my videographer, Adam Hightower, his wife, Sasha, she came out, she called me. I was the first one she called. She's like, hey, I need some support here. Like, this is what happened to me. And then I had another friend who happened to her, and she's like salt of the earth, like just, the atypical Mormon mom. It's like, oh shit, this is like, this really happened.
Yeah. One report that has come into Ryan that is not public yet is that, there's probably about 8 women on the lawsuit right now, but it's been reported to us that it's going to be upwards towards like 30, but that not everyone is putting their name because that is how prolific that Tim got around. So, there are a lot of things, a lot of abuse that's happened. And that's part of the reason why I will like face down a grizzly bear in the woods. Like, I have no fear. I will die doing this. Somebody wants to murder me.
I'm not afraid of Tim's group though. Like, I don't think you are either. It's like,
people want me to be afraid.
I don't think they have any power at this point.
People get worried. I get worried sometimes. I'm like, people could come after me in certain ways, but I'm like, I don't have anything to lose. I don't have anything to gain. I want to speak the truth. I want to support these women. I am close friends now with some of them. Like when I first, it's a very cool feeling to be able to not know somebody. I don't know their names. I don't know if I ever will know them. Back in September 2023, and just as more and more reports coming out, just like, I'm not just like I believe all women with absolutely no evidence, but I was like, I can see there is a total pattern here. I made an entire 3-hour podcast on before any of the stuff when the women come out. I was like, we have enough rocket fuel of fraud already to know that Tim is capable of all this other stuff yet. Just to let people know what he's already done up to this point before the women even speak out, just to support them. Like that, it's extremely humiliating and frightening, and they've had so many mental health challenges, and it's humiliating and so many things that you don't want to be that person who has to come out against a anti-sex trafficking organization to say all of the things because all of the smears that have been thrown at them. They don't want to do this. They signed up for the cause because I saw that in them from the beginning. Sure. And to be close friends with them means the world to me, to be able to, like, if they can't always use their voices, that I can use mine, any platform, anytime I can, to just draw attention to this.
Have you been surprised that Tim has doubled down as much as he have? I have. If it was me, I would just disappear into the night. Like, dude just is like, he's just acting like he doesn't have 20 women saying that he was, sexually inappropriate with him. I'm just like, the balls on this guy. He was just
on a podcast the other day. I know. Some lady it has 0 views on it, and he is saying things that, sometimes the podcast he goes on, I will comment. I'm like, his face is red. He looks like he's drunk the way he's ranting about these women. And the problem is, to get serious about it, this is such a serious cause about everything to do with childhood trafficking, rape, the worst horrors in the world. And I don't feel like he takes it seriously enough. Mm. And that's where a lot of my beef is, because so to push back on what you said, I have to push back on the idea that Tim Ballard had good intentions from the beginning and then his ego took over, because we need to look at how everything started from the very beginning and what was going on throughout before things kind of broke down when you're at this event for Nazarene Fund and he's screaming about how his picture's not there. Like, all of that has roots that all had to start with seeds somewhere. So for instance, his main intelligence source is Janet Russin being this.
Yeah, that's pretty whack.
That's a decade's worth of his main and mostly only intelligence source being a psychic that was basically given to him by M. Russell Ballard, endorsed by M. Russell Ballard. And what I've uncovered is there's a whole network of psychics that the church uses and Tim Ballard has been using. That's some egotistical bullshit.
Let me ask you though, if that's, because I'll push back on that being ego. Remember when you were fully in the church, if one of the apostles says this is a person that gets revelation for God, because that's probably how it was worded, not they're psychics and seeing things. Mm-hmm. If they're getting revelation, your patriarchal blessing, that alone is like basically a psychic, like if you want to be honest. And so I can see where a member of the church is like, holy cow, the apostle says this person's getting the information. Okay. Like, he obviously knows. Mm-hmm. I would have believed it because when I was 100% in. So
I can see what you mean, but in concert with everything else I'm about to mention.
I hate that I'm even defending Tim. I don't need to, but my point is, I know it's good to play devil's advocate.
I have empathy and understanding for that perspective, of course. But as I as I can explain, I explained in the last, like the little documentary thing that I put up last week about Tim Ballard, that his tactics were just not always useful. And from the very beginning, in his own speeches, he's stated that nobody was talking about trafficking in 2002, like when he was pioneering this. And the first thing he did was buy books about Harriet Tubman and Abraham Lincoln and the Underground Railroad and and then read his scriptures. And I don't believe that somebody is serious. That's what I was talking about earlier. I am serious. I'm serious as a heart attack about ending the abuse of women and children and exploitation in all of its forms around the world, especially things that are of the sexual nature, right? To be fucking for real, that you don't know what you're doing and your thing to go to is reading books about Harriet Tubman. That's really sweet. That's really nice. But there are systemic ways in which people tackle this who are realistic about how to get to fix this problem. And it's not the tactics that he goes through. He goes through the Mormon channels because, to your point, he believes in his head that is the avenue to save the most people. But it does come from this, whatever it's not something that he grew out of himself. There's no free will to it. Like, he is a Mormon man who was raised with these patriarchal, instinctual ideas about his future godhood. Like, it makes sense that he already has this ego to him, but this is not a realistic way to attack the problem.
So let me play devil's advocate again. So I get invited to go on these ops. My first op, it was a complete shit show. I could not believe the disorganization and what they were actually doing. However, in my mind, I don't know if it's called groupthink or cognitive dissonance or whatever you want to call it, but like, I kept thinking like, this doesn't feel right. But I kept thinking to myself, well, they know what they're doing. So clearly this is the way to do it, because you just assume these people know. And so trust me, they didn't. And I hate the way, looking back, I hate the way that we did it. I really do. But it felt 100%, it felt like I should be doing it that way because I was told that's how we're doing it. And so I know that sounds stupid to hear, but like, I was just this naive dude coming in
sounds stupid at all.
that basically bought my way into this thing, you know? And so I'm on this op and I'm just sitting there like, okay, I guess. And you have ex-Navy SEALs, you've got these doctors, you've got these people that, and you know, Tim, to me, as far as I knew, the story he had told everyone is that he did this for the CIA for a decade. So like, I'm just like, oh, okay, this dude has expertise. You just assume everybody knows what they're doing. And so I can look at it now and be like, what the hell were we doing? But it felt so right or so normal at the time to just go along with what they were doing. And so I felt like I was part of the solution. This is where I'm getting at. I felt like I was absolutely a pivotal piece in the solution, and I had no understanding of what was needed or what should have been happening. I had no knowledge. I had no expertise. I didn't study it. I didn't look into it myself. I just went along with what these people told me we should be doing. And so I could see where somebody could just think they have it figured out, but they actually are so far off. And maybe it's different for Tim because he was the one in charge. But like for me, I didn't do any of the studying or any of the research myself. I just went along with it and I thought it was the right thing. And so I don't know, there's a naivety to that. But
yeah, the way you talk, you sound like we're like a missionary with like,
kind of.
You know, that's what it sounds like. Like I was just following the mission president and like the zone leader. And like, that makes perfect sense because when somebody tells you, I think this is true in so many aspects of life, that somebody who just speaks from a place of authority and this is the way it is, and you keep yes people around you and everyone else is nodding along. I think that is one of the core like hero's journey things that everyone has to go through in their life, is to stop and say, wait, my intuition is telling me something different. I went along to get along because I wanted this X outcome. And now I'm looking back and having these regrets because I didn't develop my own like integrity and intuition to stand up for what's right.
Well, that was the day I stepped away from it. Yeah. We were in Ecuador and we were doing an op. I've told you about this one. And basically the operator, the main guy in charge, was trying to get this dude like entrapped is what the word I'll use. And the dude just saw the opportunity to make some money. And he was trying to basically whore out his girlfriend to us, who was like 15 or 14. And I remember they pulled us in this like little side room to like get to see her or like see that he actually knew, you know, some women he's trafficking. And I could tell the way they were treating each other. I'm like, these two are like boyfriend, girlfriend. I could just tell. And he's sitting there telling us, yeah, look, this is the girl I traffic or whatever. And I'm sitting here going, this is not a trafficker. This dude's literally trying to make some money here. And so I pulled him aside and I said, dude, that's your girlfriend, isn't it? And he like finally told me yes. And I said, get the hell out of here. You're not a trafficker. And that was the last stop I ever did. I couldn't do it after that. I was like, that was finally, I'd realized this is not okay. Like, this is not the way this should be going. And that was my last stop. It was the time I was done with it. But it did take me quite a while to get to that spot, even though your intuition's like, but it's also weird because it's such high stakes. Like if these guys figure out you're undercover, you could be dead. There was at least 2 ops I was on where if they knew at any point we were undercover, we were dead. Like we would have gone right there. And so you are dealing with such high stakes that you don't ever want to step out of bounds. You don't want to, that kid in Ecuador, I could just tell he wasn't dangerous. And so I pulled him aside, but I would have never done that with the traffickers in some of these other areas.
Yeah,
it literally would have been life and death.
Yeah. And I'm sure you said in that other podcast about like 2 things can be true at once and stuff. But yeah, there is a lot of nuance to the situation. And I wanted to ask you, you mentioned in your previous podcast that you had been to Gesno's orphanage in Haiti.
Yeah.
And if you heard the video that I mentioned,
I did watch it, yeah.
There is a specific detail by Jeff Frazier, who was running some aftercare for that orphanage, that for the listeners who don't know, there's an orphanage called Foyer des Sions in Haiti that was run by Gesno Marty, who is this kidnapped little boy, Gardy Marty. It's kind of part of the whole inception story of o.u.r. Gardy Marty was kidnapped. His father and Tim got connected. And the TV show / movie, The Abolitionist, features like this storyline where they needed a villain. So they take down one orphanage director and call her a sex trafficker and trap her in all these different ways inside this film. That's what I did in my latest YouTube video documentary where I break down all of that. But one of the key pieces that I'm really disturbed by is how much money o.u.r. raised based on Gesno's story and where that money went. The transparency just isn't there for me. And I don't know if o.u.r. knew that children were being raped and were getting abortions at the hands of the staff members. I don't know the level to which Gesno knew these things. I just heard you mention that podcast that you've been to that orphanage.
Yeah.
I wanted to get your perspective on what happened.
It was kind of like, it felt, this is why life's so funny. Like the day I heard about so the day I heard about o.u.r. earlier that morning, I had a girl from high school I haven't talked to this girl in 12, 15 years at the time. Her name was Liz Barnum. And she calls me up and she's like, Jimmy, I didn't even know which Liz it was. She's just calling me. I haven't talked to her forever. She was like one of my best friends in high school though. She's like, me and my husband have been working at this orphanage in Haiti. We just feel called like they were.
What was her name again?
Liz Barnum. She changed her last name. Liz Barnum. That's not the last name she went by. She got married, but that's how I remember her. Anyways, she ended up committing suicide. So that's why I'm not remembering that. Yeah. But she had called me and she's like, hey, I just feel called to invite you, me and this Christian group. She left the LDS church. I was still very much in the LDS church at the time. She's like, we're going to Haiti. We work at this orphanage and we want you to come, her and her husband, James. And I'm just like, you know what? When is it? She's like, it's over New Year's. And I'm like, oh, I'm not going over New Year's to Haiti. Like, no way. And so I'm like, thanks for inviting me. And she's like, hey, really think about it. And it was on my way to a networking event called Connect Share. So I get to this event and they have it's basically like a super networking event, a really cool event where people network with each other. And they always had a charity get up and talk at the beginning. Well, Paul Hutchinson, this is the first time I met him, gets up and he speaks about this operation for o.u.r. they had just done in Colombia. And he's telling us the whole story of the Operation Triple Take, the whole thing. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Then he says, we're going to go work with this orphanage in Haiti. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, I'm telling you, 45 minutes earlier, this girl randomly, and it's not connected. To this day, it was never connected. And it's the same fucking orphanage. And I'm just like, whoa. And I'm like, okay, God is telling me I need to be a part of o.u.r. Literally, that's why I felt so called to join. I literally thought it was God calling me between these two people, this experience I had. And I still believe that. And it's like, you need to go do this. So I approached Paul after that. And that's how so long story short, I ended up going with Liz and her group over New Year's. After Paul spoke, I'm like, well, I guess I should go. Interesting. So I went and worked at the orphanage as a Christian volunteer. So the first time I went to
What year was this?
Oh gosh, 2013, 12, 14, somewhere.
Because I'm pretty sure Abolitionist was filmed in 14.
So it's probably right before that.
Yeah.
2013 maybe. So I'd never heard of Tim yet until that point. I now had heard of Paul, but I still hadn't heard of Tim. I mean, he told the story of the guy that left the CIA and everything, but I didn't know Tim. I go do the orphanage, have literally there's this girl, Jenica. She's this cute little 3-year-old in Haiti that just won my heart. And I just like fell in love with these kids. You basically spend 10 straight days with these kids jumping all over you. And our whole job was to just love them. And it was like the best 10 days. It was amazing. I had this amazing experience. Guesno pulled me aside. That's where I met him. He was running the orphanage. And he actually tried to get me to pay $25,000. They knew I had some money of all the volunteers there. And they wanted me to donate 25 grand for something. I don't remember what it was, like some water or a chicken coop or some shit. And I just remember being like, ugh, I'm just not committed to do that. They try to really pull on your heartstrings. So I'd leave, come back. And it was about 6 months later, I had to go through some fight to kill training that Paul put me through. So for the next 6 months, I was doing like Krav Maga training. And then at the end of that year, because it was November of that year, so almost a full year later, o.u.r. was going to do an op in Haiti, and they invited me to come, my first op. So I got to go back. The op got broke. That was the one where they almost got killed. I don't know if you've ever heard about that one, where these dudes basically chased him out of this neighborhood. It was probably the most dangerous op they ever had. And Janet had told him to go there.
Janet.
And anyway, so by the time I got to Haiti...
Wait, so that wasn't the one where they're on the hill, the top of the hill getting chased out?
Yeah, that was that one. I think. That was the same time. Yes, because the op totally got busted.
It might have been a different one.
It might have been. It doesn't matter. Most of Haiti went wrong, for the record. So like everything, it might have been different. But I just know the op got totally bombed. Like something crazy happened. So by the time I got there, it was like busted. Like, we're not doing the op. I had 15 of my friends. I had put together my own trip to go work at the orphanage for a week with a bunch of my best friends. So they were all going to meet me there on the tail end of me doing my op with o.u.r. So I'd planned it so I'd already be there. So anyway, long story short, o.u.r. we ended up going, instead of doing the op, we just went to the orphanage because the rescue was botched. And at that orphanage, there was a guy, I'll never forget, because super wealthy guy. He was adopting 2 kids. And as he was there, I was standing there. I was next to him, was in the backyard of this orphanage. He found out that there was a 3rd kid that he was going to have to adopt, a baby brother that these 2 that he was adopting had. And I remember his face just like, him realizing he was gonna have to adopt a 3rd kid. And so he was adopting these 3 people. But so it was just weird. It was like the worlds were like colliding, and it was like, it just felt so inspired from God, if I'm being honest. I'm like, how do I end up at the same orphanage with 2 completely random groups? And it was literally called Zion, the orphanage. So that probably played into my whole thing. And so that was like, and then so Tim was there, and he hadn't adopted his kids yet, but he was playing with them there. And then we left, and we didn't do any op. That was my first op with o.u.r. was that experience in Haiti.
Mm-hmm. And so let me ask you, did you see anything at the orphanage that made you like concerned or suspicious or like felt off to you? Anything about Gesno?
No, I mean, the only thing that I didn't like was the way that he asked me for money. It was just very like manipulative, and I kind of see through that stuff. That's probably why I didn't do it. No, honestly, I didn't see. And that's the thing that was hard. Like even with Tim, I never saw Tim do anything shady. I don't think that stuff, especially with the women, started till we were all gone. I mean, I'd been gone for 5 years when that story broke, but like, I never saw anything that was a red flag. I really didn't. The only thing that was red flags was, looking back, was like the way we were doing the ops. But I will say, like, the intention felt so right. Like everybody was so excited to do the op and to do the rescue. I will say, like, Tim had a bunch of his like ward members there on one of the ops, and these people were the worst undercover. Their garments are like hanging out, and they're just like, they literally could not have looked less like sex traffickers. Like picture your average Mormon family playing games on a Sunday night in their living room. This was like the people we had trying to pretend to be sex traffickers.
Because those are the people who could pay like $50,000.
Correct. I remember one was a big time author, and one was in his ward and donated some money. And so that was like, now that I look at it, I'm like, God, we put ourselves in some dangerous situations. Like these guys were not good undercover. They were terrible. But at the time I was just like, all right, well, I guess they just need people in the scene, you know?
It's I mean, yeah, they might be bad undercover, but like any Mormon guy with the garments hanging out could also be a sex trafficker too.
You know what? You're down. Yeah, now that I say it, but you know, it's fair enough.
He's either, if I saw him on the beaches of Columbia, I'd be like, he's either undercover for Tim or he's legitimately just left his calling in the bishopric, and he's also on a sex vacation. Like,
yeah, if you Google Mormon bishop sexual assault, plenty of things come up.
That's all I'm saying. I'm like, yeah, it's possible. But yeah, that's what again, the intentions and how things have played out, I'm like, I look at things from a systemic point of view of what are things that are going to trickle down to harm kids, and what are we doing at the top to make sure those systems are in place with the checks and balances that are necessary. And if there's just like one dictator in charge, like Tim, who's like, I worked at the CIA pushing papers for 1 year. I worked at Homeland Security and I gave this up, and I have this ordination from God. I have this blessing from M. Russell Ballard. I have these deals. Not being able to question that and push back. And I don't know if it's just like the obedience culture of Mormons and people who are working for him, generally speaking, but I just think that that breeds, especially what's gone on with the women, like this is spiritual manipulation of what I think he was able to do.
Well, it's crazy how much it it runs parallel to some of the things that have happened in the early church and things like that, right? Like, but I will say, like, because there was good, o.u.r. was full of some amazing, Matt Osborne's a great man. I love that guy. Like I would absolutely trust that guy with my life. Jessica Mass was awesome. Like, loved working with her. Like some of these people that were there, the problem that it had is I'm telling you, like Tim and that ego at the top, just like it just infected in a negative way everything that was going on. And so I can imagine after we were pushed out that there was just nobody to keep the train on the track.
Yeah. And I don't want to like push back too much and disrespect your perspective because I haven't walked in your shoes, but just from what I know, like I would have to disagree about like Osborne and Jessica Bass, because just from what I know about the orphanage, just the facts on the table, that if Jeff Frazier, who was operating this thing, and he says, it says in the Vice article, to my knowledge, that's what's been reported, that in the Abolitionist, Tim Ballard goes after one orphanage director who wasn't a sex trafficker, but that's kind of the way that he paints it in the footage that he needs to manipulate to create the myth, to create the money, to create this fame for all of this whiteboard things of what he's trying to accomplish. So he takes down people, he calls them sex traffickers, throws innocent people in prison sometimes. You know, they don't have the human rights to be able to have things respected and attorneys. Like, I just think that they're operating in countries where they're able to film things and manipulate things to create the myth that is most advantageous for them. So that there, and then take this woman, Rose Pressois, like I explained in this video that they do in the Abolitionist, take a lot of her kids from her orphanage and then funnel them into the one that you went to, Foyer de Sion, that's Gesno's orphanage. I don't have good feelings about Gesno. And the fact that Catherine also has this nonprofit of Children Need Families, it feels suspicious to me that she also has a way to fundraise and get money and take money off of the top to then funnel children into wealthier American families. So that, but here's the thing, all of that, I just seems very suspicious. And so for like Osborne, Jessica Mass, and Jeff Frazier, Gesno, Tim, those are the five that are coming to mind right now. They all, in my opinion, knew that there were, like that says in the Vice article, Jeff Frazier says that there was abuse and that there was a child that was raped and had to go get a subsequent abortion by a staff member at that orphanage. That happened, and then they were fundraising still off of the stories. Then by 2020, Jeff Frazier is making these videos on YouTube pleading for more donations. It's like, where did that money go? Can they actually say that these kids were better off in Gesno's orphanage than the other one that they made an entire film off of, saying that these kids were sex trafficked, that Gardy was there or something? I'm like, can you actually say that you placed them in a better home in Gesno's orphanage where a child was raped and had to get an abortion, according to the Vice article, according to what Jeff Frazier said?
So, all right. So I'll give you a perspective here.
The Jessica Mass and Matt Osborne would have known that. And Tim Ballard would have known that.
So here's what I'll say. So, you see all that and it's like, okay, so to push back on that again, I was at the orphanage. I didn't see a single thing that looked off. Now, it's Haiti. Like, you got to understand, there's 3 buildings in the entire fucking country that shouldn't be condemned. Like, that country is a shithole. And the kids absolutely looked like they were in a better place than they were otherwise. Now, we stayed at a halfway house while we were there where they had families that were adopting these kids. They were good people. And I worked with Children Need Families. I actually got to go because we raised a lot of the money at my event. That was Tim's requirement to speak at my event, was a bunch of the money went to Children Need Families. So because I helped raise that money directly, I went with my old bishop, who's one of the salt of the earth dudes, and we went to the family. I think I did 2 families that were adopting, and we were giving like the scholarship to help them raise the money. And these were not rich families. Like there's actually videos, I could go back on my Snapchat probably, because I remember Snapchatting it, and I could show you the house they lived in. These families were not wealthy. They just wanted to adopt. And I truly think those people had good intentions. As far as like what Matt Osborne and Jessica Mass like knew or didn't know, or these different people at o.u.r, I'm telling you, I just think most people's intentions were good. This seemed like they all were. And you say about the girl that got raped. Well, there's 300 kids there, and whoever raped her, I'm guessing was from Haiti because all their employees were Haitian. And so, you know, you have kids anywhere from babies to like 14 or 15 years old. And I could see how in Haiti, it's a shit show. It's like a free for all. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's what I mentioned in my video. I'm like, I'm not saying that Haitian orphanages are bastions of like dignity,
right. So did a girl there?
One. But my point is like, what did o.u.r know, and were they using the story? That's my point. Is like using the story, the myth of like, look at all the good we're doing at this specific orphanage without.
Well, there's no
doing
doubt
anything
o.u.r
to change and invest those funds properly.
There's no doubt o.u.r was a propaganda machine to raise money. Like if you see, I think there's a report that came out one year of how much money they raised versus how much actually went towards operations. It's crazy. It was like 30 million raised, and like 2 million went towards the kids. Like it was a crazy, awful number. And so to your point, I absolutely think that they took advantage of every opportunity they could. I mean, you look what who is that crazy girl? I had her, Coco Birthman, right? Like she comes out with her story. They were the first ones to jump on it. Why? Because it'll help them raise money. Turns out the whole thing's a fraud. You had the Wayfair story. Tim freaking mentioned that. I'm like, bro, you sound like a psycho right now. Like Wayfair's not trafficking kids in their, on their website. But he would take advantage of every story that had anything to do with trafficking. Now, I said this on my podcast. I don't think the problem's as big as people say it is. I've been on the record saying this multiple times. Like we had to work really hard to find anybody trafficking in some of these cities.
Which is a bold thing for you to say, but like you're the only person in your position who can say that.
I was like, I don't even care if people don't like what I say because I was fucking there. Like it wasn't that easy to find them. Like in most of the time, there was 2 cities where it was really easy to find. The rest of the cities, it was really hard. Like we spent 4 days in Mexico City, didn't find shit. Like not even a trace of it. We spent time in these cities where it just wasn't there, if I'm being honest. And so my point of that is I think they had to create false narratives, you could say, or exaggerate things that were happening in order to make the problem seem bigger than it was. And that in and of itself is really screwed up. And I do believe that o.u.r, everybody is guilty of that, and Tim especially, because they keep throwing out these numbers. Well, I remember when I first joined o.u.r, the number was like a couple 100,000. By the time I left, I swear to God, they were saying like 7 million. It was like the number just kept getting bigger. No, and I'm saying the same thing. I'm like, where are these kids? There's not 7 million kids missing. Sorry. Where are they? It's not possible. I don't believe that. And so I don't know. I think that we both are probably right here in some ways. I just think that most of the people involved, I know Paul, Andy, Jeremy, myself, Lopez, Dutch, all these guys that we were going, every single person there truly was there for the right reasons. Our intentions were, so we paid our own way. We raised money for this thing. Like we really believed in the cause. And now whether Tim did or didn't, or did tell he didn't, whatever, I don't know. But I'm telling you, like these people that I knew, like Matt Osborne, were good men and they cared deeply. And whether or not they overlooked things because they just wanted the cause was bigger than this bullshit going on, I don't know. And that could be examined. But I just think that's the one thing that we'll disagree on is I just think people's intentions were good.
I think we'll have to disagree on that because, again, I've started this podcast because there's so much information that has come to me because I know how much is coming out that I have to be on this train for like probably at least 2 years to see it through of how many things are going to come out. And it's my understanding right now that there's a lot of things that the aftercare programs, like if I was in the position, let's say, of Jessica Mass, where I was running the aftercare program, and I heard Tim share stories and make videos and say all these things about the type of aftercare program that you can expect when you donate to o.u.r and what the aftercare programs are. And then if I knew that the people that were reporting to me had something different and I knew how much money was allocated, I knew the stories of kids were being raped in our aftercare homes. I knew that the stories that Tim was saying was not matching up with what I was actually doing. I would feel like a fraud if I was Jessica Mass. That's my point.
Well, I will say this about the aftercare. No one's ever been able to show us a single kid that was rescued. So I will say that, like, for what it's worth, and I don't know where they are. I never saw one. Like, when we would do the rescue, we never saw it happened. And so, to your point on that, Well, like if somebody was attacking my organization and I had actually saved 2,000 kids and put them in aftercare, I would just start showing you kid after kid. I'd just start showing you all the stories, you know.
Yeah, and if you saw the clip that I showed in my documentary of Tim on Fox News, where he's like, it's going to be very awkward when these kids, they're young adults now, when they start coming out and telling their stories. I would love to be proven wrong every time.
Same, yeah.
If there is a kid, genuinely, anyone that you saved and anyone that you arrested, genuinely, if there is a kid who was in any kind of sexual abuse situation and o.u.r. did something to help get them out of that situation, I hope that they are able to speak out and share that. The only problem, though, is that the mechanisms and the money and the funneling into Tim Ballard's organizations now, between Aerial Recovery Group, Spear Fund, and o.u.r. as it is today without Tim Ballard, I don't believe any of these organizations have good practices that they operate by. So it's like, I hope those kids are rescued, but I still don't think they should be used as propaganda and fundraising for. Well,
and I'm probably naive, if we're being honest. I'd probably just hope that my work wasn't in vain. You know?
It's like when you serve a mission, you're like, I was doing some good, you know, like, and I totally respect that.
Well, it was such a powerful experience for me, right? Like it really was. It was life changing in every single way. And I did see the kids that were being trafficked and that we had get rescued, but what happened after that, I don't know. I can't tell you, like if they were just sent back home. And anyway, well, it's a fun conversation to have. I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate that work you're doing. I know a lot of these women, you know, one thing that it's crazy how many people don't feel like they have a voice. So to have somebody that's willing to put themselves out there, like I have and like you have, I think it gives people a lot of hope and a lot of confidence. And so I think it's really good what you're doing. That's why I want to have you on the show. So if people want to reach out, they want to follow you, they want to learn more about all this, where is the best place to send them?
So my YouTube channel is Carah Burrell, and then me and Ryan work together. My co-host Ryan Fisher is amazing. So I have 2 podcasts that are on my YouTube channel, Timmy Did What? And the Mormon History Hoedown. And so I have to take a little bit of a hiatus right now because I am moving and doing some stuff in my personal life, but we'll be back on track in the next couple of weeks. So I have those 2 podcasts. I have a couple Patreons that are linked, and if you can support the podcast any way you can, they're available wherever you listen to your podcasts. And then you can follow me on all the platforms at Nuancehoe. And then if you want to get in touch with me, my email is linked wherever. You can put it in the show notes. It's thenuancehoe@gmail.com if somebody wants to get in touch with me. So yeah, I'm pretty active on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube. And we try to make these Timmy Did What podcasts as much as we can. And then you reached out after I made this long-awaited kind of documentary about this whole entire story. So I was excited to get that out. So if anyone wants to go check out my best work I just released.
It's really well done. And I actually agree with everything you said in that. Like when that documentary came out, I was like, I don't know about this. Like, because I watched it at ClickFunnels when it was first released. I was there as a representative of the undercover team.
You're talking about the abolitionist.
Yeah. And so...
because I had never watched it. I've been doing this for a year and a half almost, and I had never watched it. And a couple of weeks ago, when I was like, I really want to finish this YouTube video, this documentary, and my jaw was like a jar because as I explain in that, there's just certain edits he makes where he says she confessed. Then why isn't it on film?
Never showed it, right?
Like, and so many manipulations of so many things that I was just...
Well, even watching your video, I'm like, God, I missed a lot of this the first time. You know, it's like...
Yep, they say I have a good BS meter, so...
Well, you see, I think sometimes you just see what you want to. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, God, you just want to believe in shit, you know?
By the way, my favorite part, too, I have many favorite parts, but where I was able to... Now that we know that Janet Russin was a psychic, and the way in that film that there's this woman with a blurred face, and then he says stuff like, then the trail went cold, and then by some miracle an informant came forward and told us where Gardy is.
That was the informant.
And then they say, I show these clips in the documentary that I put out, and it's like, she says, like, the informant says that Gardy is being held where there's a fork in a river at the camp, and there's a sea-looking tree, and then they get in their chopper, and then they're like, oh, is that the sea tree? Now it looks so obvious in hindsight that you're like, you guys were talking to a fucking psychic, weren't you? And Tim's like, there's some kids down there. We should go down there. Just like,
it's pretty wild.
It's pretty
wild that was the source. Like, that's pretty wild.
And that, like, Dave Lopez,
like, Goonies had a better map than they did. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, like, so much money, so much resources. Like, I want you guys to do good, but
I know.
All right.
God bless.
Yeah.
Thank you again so much.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's been fun.